Ron Jaworski here for Stopain with your fantasy starts and stops for this week. Now, I know a lot of championship games are being played this weekend. And remember what I told you last week, that little bit of advice? Check the weather. Weather has an important bearing on your fantasy lineups once again as we go into championship week. All right, here's who you need to start. Let's start with the quarterbacks. As we know, it's always all about the quarterbacks. So if you want big points and you have the ability to start Phillip Rivers, start him this week. Phillip Rivers against the Oakland Raider defense should be a big point getter. The Raider defense has been struggling all season long. Think back to Nick Foles throwing 7 touchdown passes. Think back to last week, Jamal Charles garnering 5 touchdowns against that Raider defense. Phillip Rivers should have a big game against the Raider defense. Andy Dalton of the Cincinnati Bengals, start him if you have him on your roster against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings defense has given up 32 touchdown passes this season. 32, that is correct. I think Andy Dalton has a big game against that Viking defense. And oh, by the way, we saw Nick Foles throw for over 400 yards against that Viking defense. So quarterback-wise, Phillip Rivers, and of course a big red Andy Dalton in Cincinnati should be your starts. Let's go to the wide receivers. Pierre Garçon versus the Dallas Cowboys. And we've watched this Dallas Cowboy defense all season long. Their numbers are historically bad. There's no reason to believe Pierre Garçon will not have a big day against that Dallas secondary. Their lack of a pass rush and their depleted the linebacking core should be a big day. Even with Kirk Cousins at quarterback for the Washington Redskins, I would start Pierre Garçon against that Dallas defense. And Brandon Marshall against the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, Philadelphia's defense has been uneven all season long. Yes, stretch they played well, but fantasy wide receivers have done very well against this Eagle defense. Brandon Marshall should have a big game. Alshon Jeffrey on the other side, 2 beast wide receivers, but I believe it's Brandon Marshall who has the big game against the Eagles. So start Pierre Garçon and Brandon Marshall at wide receiver. At running back, LaShawn McCoy of the Eagles. The Eagles play the Chicago Bears. I know they're getting Lance Briggs back from injury, but I think this Bears defense is still very susceptible to the running game. And by the way, McCoy only had 8 carries last week. That won't happen again. He's the leading rusher in the National Football League. He has a big game. LaShawn McCoy versus the Chicago Bears. And Frank Gore of the San Francisco 49ers, start him playing great football. And you look at the 49ers are playing much improved football, particularly over the last 4 games. Balance is back in San Francisco. The passing certainly of Colin Kaepernick, but the running of Frank Gore, the power running of Frank Gore against that Atlanta Falcons defense should mean a very good game for Frank Gore. So LaShawn McCoy of the Philadelphia Eagles, Frank Gore of the San Francisco 49ers, start them this week. Now it's time for our Stopain Stop of the week. What's the defense that you want to put out there? To me, it's going to be the Detroit Lions defense. That's right, the Lions against the New York Giants. And this is an interesting stat. Here comes the stats. Always got some good stats for you, folks. The Giants are giving up the most fantasy points to defenses this year. So clearly, you look at Eli Manning's 25 interceptions, 5 interceptions last week. I would say the defense of the Detroit Lions, you must start them this week. Tune in next week for my Stopain Stops and Starts. Merry Christmas, everyone.